at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Happy Sunday, one and all. It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, protests on Armistice Day are a profound insult to our war dead, an attack on the values of this country. Why can't the authorities deal with this? Who runs Britain anyway? And by the way, what's happened to Keir Starmer's Poppy? As they turn a blind eye to calls for terror on our streets, is British policing no longer fit for purpose? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Home Office Minister and politics legend Anne Widdecombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. A packed show, lots to get through. And let me tell you, that take at 10 is coming. I'm not pulling my punches. Who runs Britain and why can't the police police British values? It's a big one. It's after the headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening to you. Our top stories tonight. Boris Johnson has urged Israel's allies to stay the course in their support for Israel in its war against Hamas. The former Prime Minister toured some of the communities attacked by terrorists on the 7th of October. In an exclusive interview with our security editor, Mark White, he said he was horrified by what he saw and he called on the international community to remember those events.
Look at what happened. Remember, this was sadism. This was an orgy of brutality and torture against innocent people. People were chased around the rooms in their houses and shot. Now, there's a difference between that and what the Israeli soldiers are now trying to do in Gaza. So your point, Mark, about what the international community needs to remember is the difference between what Israel experienced, the terrorist attack, and what they're trying to do now. What they're trying to do now is make sure that never happens again.
Well, you can see more of that exclusive interview with Boris Johnson tomorrow from breakfast at 6 and then throughout the day on GB News. Well, Tel Aviv has been hit by a second major rocket barrage in just 2 hours this evening. Sirens sounded across the city as Iron Dome missile defence systems lit up the night sky. The first attack occurred just minutes after former PM Boris Johnson visited an aid distribution centre in central Tel Aviv. There are no reports yet of any impacts or injuries. The Rafah crossing did not reopen today, despite Foreign Office hopes that more Britons could escape from Gaza. Earlier, First Minister Humza Yousaf posted a photo showing his in-laws. They've arrived back in Scotland after being trapped in the Strip for more than 3 weeks. Egypt decided to suspend evacuations following a deadly attack on an ambulance. Well, the Met Police say 6 people have now been charged after 29 arrests at pro-Palestine protests in central London. It comes as the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary expressed their concerns about further demonstrations during Armistice Day. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has promised to take a robust approach to ensure commemorative events are not undermined. And finally, riot police are trying to control around 100 young people in the Niddry area of Edinburgh, with fireworks being thrown directly at officers. Police Scotland have confirmed that they've also been subjected to attacks from petrol bombs. Buses have been cancelled in the area and roads closed as well. The public is being asked to avoid that area. Well, this is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to Mark.
The splendid Ray Addison is back in an hour's time. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight. As they turn a blind eye to calls for terror on our streets, is British policing no longer fit for purpose? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Home Office Minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. Former Brexit Party MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Conservative member of the House of Lords Lord Taylor of Warwick, and top trade unionist Andy MacDonald. They'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros, so a packed hour to come. Plus, are we heading towards World War III? I'll be joined by a top military expert before the end of the show. First up, my take at 10. Against a backdrop of industrial strife in the 1970s and the unions out of control with workers downing tools every 10 minutes, the Conservatives ran an election campaign based upon a simple slogan: who runs Britain? Well, it's a good question today. Since the horrific terror attack on Israel on October the 7th, we've seen a tension between the principle of the right to protest versus the protection of all communities in our country. We've seen a tension between free speech and hate speech, and a tension between the tolerance of foreign values versus the protection of British values. Every weekend, with these often disturbing demonstrations in central London, Manchester and beyond, the authorities, and in particular the police, have got the balance badly wrong. Masquerading as peace marches, these demonstrations have every single time descended into something far nastier, with disorder on the streets, the chanting of slogans like "from the river to the sea," and calls for intifada, which means suicide bombs on buses and in restaurants. Our hapless cops have stood idly by as dangerous thugs call for a jihad or a holy war. All of this messaging is based around one thing and one thing alone: the hatred of Jewish people. If significant numbers of people can call for a holy war in the United Kingdom, in our capital city, then who runs Britain? Who polices our streets? And who stands up for British values? Our brilliant reporter, Catherine Forster, revealed that British citizens merely waving the Union Jack flag, which is the flag of this country, was subjected to harassment, threats and abuse this weekend. Look at that, what a crime now. Meanwhile, these wonderful volunteers handing out poppies and raising money for our war veterans were similarly subjected to appropriate levels of harassment that you've seen in regard to that other story. Deeply chilling stuff. Now, I'm concerned about casualties on both sides in the Middle East. Gaza is hell on earth right now, thanks to Hamas, I should add. And a two-state solution is clearly the Holy Grail. And it's my view that Israel likely has a case to answer for its treatment of Palestinians. Taking sides in the Middle East is a fool's errand. But unlike so many woke progressives in this country, including a few high-profile ones, I will never offer succour, however indirect, to terrorists. To go on or support these marches so soon after the horrors of October the 7th, whatever way you look at it, encourages these medieval monsters who think nothing of beheading babies. And calls from the Be Kind brigade of deluded lefties for a ceasefire are merely an invitation for further attacks and an effective second Holocaust on the Jewish people. Not very nice at all, is it? What kind of country are we if you get abuse for waving the national flag? What kind of country are we where one group of people, in this case Jews, can be singled out for hatred and persecution and physical threats? What kind of country are we where Jewish people feel safer in Israel, one of the most threatened territories on the planet, than they do in Great Britain? What kind of country are we where the annual tribute to our war dead, who gave their lives for the values which are now being trashed every weekend in front of the cenotaph, faces major disruption. It's possible that 2-minute silence will be disturbed next weekend. It's my view that the authorities have lost control of our national population because the actions of thousands now, in the name of free speech, are an affront to British values and, as the Prime Minister said recently, a threat to our democracy. You got a school teacher from Batley still on the run, still in hiding, having lost his job and career for the great crime of showing an image of the Prophet Muhammad as an educational tool. And you've got the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, who, having worn one earlier in the day for a keynote speech at Chatham House, later removed his poppy, there, of course, to remember our fallen heroes, whilst addressing British Muslims. The mysterious case of the missing poppy. Agatha Christie, eat your heart out. I've got a spare one here if you want it. Labour have said the absence of a poppy for that video was not in any way intentional. Poppycock. That the man who would like to be our next Prime Minister should so readily yield to the mob and discard the memory of our war dead in order to placate one particular community tells you everything you need to know about his character, about his values, and about what kind of leader he would be. I fear he would lead us into what is becoming a civil war. We are either one country with one set of values and one set of laws, or we are not. You can't have it both ways. Who runs Britain? At the moment, no one. And that's the problem. Your reaction, Mark, at GBnews.com. Now, I'm hearing from the Labour Party spokespeople that this was not intentional, the absence of a poppy. I'm not convinced. But let me know your reaction to what is happening every weekend in this country and the potential threat to next weekend's Remembrance celebrations. So Mark at GBnews.com is the email. Let's get the views now of my top pundits. Former Brexit Party MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Conservative member of the House of Lords, Lord Taylor of Warwick, and trade unionist and broadcaster Andy MacDonald. Andy, great to have you back on the show. Sorry for mentioning the unions at the beginning of the old monologue there. I hope that wasn't too triggering.
Of course not. Of course not. We're here to be mentioned.
Listen, great to have you back. Listen, your reaction to what I've had to say there. I feel that the authorities have lost control of this country.
Yeah, I'd probably say so. You know, if you look at the last 13 years of Conservative government, there's been constant cut after cut after cut of police funding. You know, there's not even been a proportionate growth of police officers over the last 13 years. You know, it's catching up to them. You know, the constant cuts to our public services. It's come to roost.
So you would argue that the challenge in policing British values is a case of numbers and resource, not policy and not culture within the police?
Well, absolutely. I don't think politicians should particularly be getting involved with police business. Otherwise, you know, that's a slippery slope. I'm sure you'll agree, Mark. But...
Well, indeed. But Andy, why have police officers been removing posters of kidnapped Israeli children in order to placate the mob and to not spark incitement? Why was a Jewish guy who's been driving around with a van that's got a screen on it, which is sort of flashing up images of those who have been taken hostage in Gaza, why did the police tell him to move on in order to not cause trouble?
I wouldn't be able to comment on those specific circumstances because I'm sure that they've got their own individual context. But from what you've said, it doesn't seem appropriate that they have done that. And that's probably just been a mismanagement of the situation.
And listen, what about Poppygate? Because you didn't forget yours tonight.
I did not. I was readily provided by the GB News producers. They've got their priorities straight. But, you know, looking at Poppy Day next week, you know, these people, they did go and fight for our British values. And one of our values is freedom of speech. And I think if they want to protest, they should be allowed to protest as long as it is respectful of the other causes that are going on that day.
But what happened to Keir Starmer's Poppy last week? Was it stolen off him? Was it mugged off him? I mean, London's a dangerous city now.
Oh, it is indeed. You know, 13 years of Tory Britain, you know, underfunding. But, of course, Keir Starmer, you know, I think he probably forgot to put it on, filmed the video beforehand, and then a press officer put it on for the speech. I would imagine it's probably just an error from the press officer corps. OK, all right. Well, look, I'll take your word for it. Lord Taylor, what do you think about what we're seeing every weekend and the possible threat to next weekend's reflections on our war dead?
Well, Mark, this is a news channel, and I have some breaking news for you. There's only one race, the human race. It's not about poppies or governments. It's about people. And God created Jews, Palestinians, black and white. So we need to get back to the basics. My favourite verse in the Bible is Matthew 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers. So we've got to look at peace. When we get to the peace, we get the blessings. My father came from Jamaica. He fought for Britain in the Second World War in the 8th Army. And years later, whenever the face of Sir Winston Churchill appeared on the TV, he would stand up and salute. And he'd say to me, boy, get up and salute. Because he understood, and I now understand as I'm an adult, that what we did in the Second World War allows us to sit here and talk in freedom. Otherwise, we'd be speaking German. So poppies are important because it's to remember the sacrifice that those men and women made for us in the Second World War. We mustn't forget that.
However, Annunziata, with people stood in front of the cenotaph every weekend calling for a holy jihad, calling for intifada, which basically means suicide bombs on buses, in restaurants and all the rest of it, I just wonder whether the values for which our war dead gave their lives are being trashed every weekend in Manchester, in Glasgow and in central London.
I think it is a real concern that we are being asked time and again, whether it's Keir Starmer with his poppy or whether it's the actual meaning of these people calling for jihad and intifada, that we give them the benefit of the doubt, that we believe their intentions are perfectly harmless or even good. And it's very odd that that benefit of the doubt isn't being given the other way round. That there seem to be an awful lot of calls that the Israelis, and by extension to a lot of people, the Jewish people, are murderously going into Gaza. I don't think that's their intention. I'm absolutely sure they want to root out the evil that invaded their country and killed and raped their people.
They have a right to defend themselves.
And they have an absolute right to defend themselves.
They're the only true democracy in the Middle East,
they
Israel.
Deserve our support in defending themselves, and support starts at home. That we have got to show our support on our streets and amongst our people to stand up against this true evil of Hamas.
Well, coming up as they turn a blind eye to calls for terror on our streets, is British policing no longer fit for purpose? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Home Office Minister Anne Widdecombe. She's next. Plus, tomorrow's front pages are on the way. Later in the show, are we heading for World War III? I'll speak to a top military and war expert. Lots to come, but Anne Widdecombe is next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, listen, a strong reaction to my take at 10. I think the police have lost control of the streets. I don't think they've got the balance right between the right to protest and the protection of specific communities in our country. Steve has said, Mark, if armistice is disrespected, blood will flow. Trust me, the British bulldog is like a bubbling volcano waiting to explode. We will see. Enough, says Steve. Well, look, Steve, I do hope that nothing turns violent, because we must always respect the rule of law. However, disagreeing slightly, Ian says, Mark, when does defence become genocide in relation to Israel? And John says, Mark, you're quite right with your take at 10. Keep going. What a difference to the woke BBC. Well, look, thank you for that. Thanks for the kind words. More of your emails shortly, mark@gbnews.com. It's time now for the Newsmaker. And this has been the 5th weekend in a row in which protesters have taken to the streets, a worrying number of whom have been chanting anti-Jewish slogans and calling for a holy war. Harassment and intimidation reached boiling point yesterday in Whitehall, with Brits waving the Union Jack subject to verbal abuse and the threat of violence. Meanwhile, in Trafalgar Square, a member of the public who was actually physically assaulted by a Palestinian protester was himself moved on by the cops. You couldn't make it up. Here's a short excerpt of what happened. We'll get you the clip shortly, but as cops turn a blind eye to calls for terror in the name of keeping the peace, is British policing no longer fit for purpose? Let's speak to former Home Office Minister and one of the best-known politicians in the country, Anne Widdecombe. Anne, I know that it's tough for law enforcement, but are officers doing enough to stand up for British values?
No, I mean, I think the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, Mark, what do we want from the police? Well, most people want to feel that if they call them because they're in danger or they're being burgled or whatever it is, that the police will come. Nowadays, it's in the lap of the gods whether they do or not. We want to feel that if we run into a difficult situation outside our homes, that there will be police nearby. There never are. They're never visible. We want to feel that they'll tackle and they'll prosecute criminals, but ask any shopkeeper when the police last took shoplifting seriously. And then when it comes to demos, what we want is that the police will act without fear or favour, that they will apply exactly the same rules to both sides of whatever argument is going on. And that certainly isn't happening at the moment. We missed the clip that you were going to show, but that's a pretty good demonstration of partiality, of dealing with one side, either with fear or favour, whatever it happens to be that motivates the police. But it's quite wrong. And I think the British public has lost confidence in them. The fact remains is some police do a seriously good job. Some lose their lives in the course of their duty. We've got to remember that. It would be quite wrong to forget that. But on the whole, I think most Brits would say now that we don't get the service that we certainly used to get from the police. And as far as this marching goes, what exactly is Parliament doing? Now, what Reform UK have called for is a straightforward law that says nobody demonstrates or marches, doesn't matter what the cause is, nobody demonstrates or marches on either Armistice Day itself or Remembrance Sunday, both those days, because the only show in town on those days should be respect for veterans.
Yeah. Most definitely. Listen, we're going to play that clip in just a moment. You'll have seen some highlights there. But before we get to it, do you accept the arguments of police chiefs, Anne, who say that they're hamstrung by the law? Are they powerless to tackle the hatred on these marches?
Oh, of course they're not powerless to tackle hatred. Good heavens, they arrest street preachers at the drop of a hat. Of course they're not powerless. They won't exercise the power. I mean, when they can say with a straight face, oh, well, you know, they didn't really want to arrest anybody for calling for a jihad because that can mean different things. It might not necessarily mean a holy war. I mean, that is the biggest load of nonsense, you know, that they could possibly come out with, but they do it with straight faces.
Well, indeed. Now, Anne, this is somebody that was in central London and he was protesting peacefully with a placard and he was assaulted by somebody that was, I guess, pro-Palestine. Now, take a look and let me have your measured verdicts on how the police handled this incident. Take a look.
Why are you here? Why are you here?
I'm here to have conversations.
Why are you being offensive minutes ago?
Do you want to move over there? Yeah. I'm moving you over there to prevent the breach of the peace. If I stand peacefully and people come and get aggressive with me, I'm the one breaching the peace? If your presence at that location is causing people to do that, then yes, OK?
Well, Anne, your assessment of that. This guy was standing very peacefully. He was physically assaulted with a placard and then escorted across the road by the cop, treated like the criminal.
Yes, that officer desperately needs some advice. But if that is the advice that has been given to them as to how to handle potential breaches of the peace, then those who are doing the advising need to take some serious stock of what they're doing. Because to say that if somebody is simply there being completely peaceful and that person is threatened, that therefore that person is causing the breach of the peace, not the one who's threatening them, that is just a piece of utter madness. I don't know what gets into the police sometimes, and I don't know what gets into, you know, strikers. I don't know what gets into the Conservative government.
Listen, Anne, let me ask you about Suella Braverman. Speaking of the Conservative government, is she right to call these demonstrations hate marches?
Some of them undeniably are, but I'm perfectly certain there are also people on those marches who don't. Who aren't motivated that way, who do genuinely want to protest for peace. Now, I happen to think they're misguided, but unless they are calling for a jihad, unless they are saying things that are deliberately anti-Semitic, unless they are doing those things, then it's difficult to call them hate marches. But if they are doing those things, if they are, and plenty of them are, then they are hate marches and they should be arrested. And I go further than that. If having been arrested and convicted of causing hatred, if any of them are here on visas, as opposed to with permanent right to remain, if any of them are here on visas, revoke the visas.
And I wish we had longer. We'll do more next week. My thanks to the former Home Office Minister, best-selling author, television personality and politics legend Anne Widdecombe, whose exasperation, I'm sure, is shared by many of you. Lots more to come. Next up, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. And they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. And at the end of the show, at 11:15, a live studio guest, The Last Word, where we look back at a big story of the week. And I'll simply be asking, are we tiptoeing towards a third world war? But next up, it's the papers. I'll see you in 2.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
A bit of housekeeping. I will be looking after 9 until 11 Monday to Thursday this coming week. That'll be my last stint for now on Monday to Thursday. So looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at 9. But it is now 10:30 and it's time for the front pages. Daily Express. Boris, Israel is fighting terror for free people across the world. And Brexit trade freedom boost for UK economy. Kemi Badenoch today blasts the Brexit doommongers after a report showing that leaving the EU has boosted UK trade. The Business and Trade Secretary will use a keynote speech to talk up the economy, which she says is thriving thanks to new trade freedoms. Mrs Badenoch will rail against those who insist freeing Britain from the shackles of Brussels has severely damaged the economy. It comes as a landmark study released tomorrow shows goods and services exports soared between 2019 and 2022. The Independent next. And NHS hit by severe drug shortages due to Brexit red tape. So there you go, 2 sides of one coin. And also Gaza Health Ministry says more than 50 killed in strikes on refugee camps. Daily Telegraph now. Met chief urged to ban Armistice Day protest. Benefit claimants face weekly account checks. And takeaway culture puts those in their 50s at greatest risk of high cholesterol. The Eye now, I think. We've got UK's National Security Council not prepared for heightened terror threat. Reassuring headline there. Metro, remember its warning, hands off cenotaph. Feet won't touch the ground before they go to jail, says Braverman, if anybody attempts to desecrate the cenotaph. Guardian next. Israeli strikes on Gaza intensify as violence on Lebanon border flares. And licensing plan for oil in King's Speech. Rishi Sunak will announce legislation for a new annual system for awarding oil and gas licences as part of a highly political King's Speech tomorrow that the Conservatives hope will open up clear dividing lines with Labour. Of course, tomorrow that refers to Tuesday because it's Monday's Guardian. Daily Mail. Pressure on Tories over serial rapist MP cover-up. And Boris tells of his horror at scene of kibbutz massacre. Daily Star. Atlantic torment. Here we blow again. Britain is about to be battered by 4 more storms as a 700-mile-wide tempest brings 70-mile-an-hour winds and torrential downpours. Bring a brolly. And those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from my brilliant pundits tonight. Former Brexit Party MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Conservative member of the House of Lords, Lord Taylor of Warwick, and trade unionist and broadcaster Andy MacDonald. Lots of stories to get through. Let's have a look at where we should start. Well, look, shall we start with some good news, Annunziata? Brexit trade freedom, a boost for the UK economy. That goes against the narrative, doesn't it?
It goes completely against the narrative, and it's barely begun. That actually, as a Brexiteer, I don't feel this government has made yet nearly enough of our Brexit freedoms and our ability to trade globally and freely with other countries. And there's much more of this to come. It's a great start. Let's get on it and keep it going.
Most definitely. Listen, Andy, your reaction to this. I don't know if you were pro or against Brexit at the time.
I was pro-Brexit at the time.
Well, there you go. So do you feel vindicated?
Not quite, no. You know, a lot of the promises were based on industrial investment in the Midlands and the North, reindustrialising the areas that have been stripped away through the 80s, 90s and early 2000s. And so far, we've not really seen much of that. You know, there's been a mine promised in, you know, where is that? Like Cumbria, I think it was.
Yeah.
You know, there's been no real investment in the heartlands of England. And I think until we get that, Brexit hasn't really worked as well as it was promised to.
Because that's why many on the left were pro-Brexit, because of the ability to have state aid, and you feel we haven't seen enough of it.
No, not at all. No, okay. I think if you look in the Midlands and the North, and a lot of those voters who lent their vote to Boris Johnson in 2019 were on that promise of industrial investment, and it just hasn't happened.
No, although it must be gratifying for you, the critics of Brexit who've said, you know, the economy was going to fall over, there'd be a flight of capital, there'd be a crash in the housing market, you know, the prophets of doom have been proved wrong, haven't they?
Well, yeah, in this case, yeah, but if you look, you know, the day after the referendum, the pound did take quite a big hit, and you know, throughout the negotiation periods, there have been hits on the UK economy. But this is very good news, I'm sure, and hopefully we'll be able to continue on this.
Yeah, Lord Taylor, what do you think?
Well, I am pro-Brexit. The problem is it was presented as an event. Brexit is a process, and the process is now happening, and it'll get better as time goes on.
Well, yes, I mean, look, I voted Remain. But I'm searching around for the Brexit disaster. Well, bless you for that. Well, I mean, back in the old days, you would accept the democratic will of the people. And after the result came out, I just thought, OK, we're leaving. Let's make the best of it. And at that point, I was pushing for a full-fat Brexit, because my view is you don't want to be half pregnant. I think if you leave the European Union, you want to have an independent trade policy and you want control of your money, law, borders, all the rest of it. Which you're not going to have
in one day.
You're not going to have that with single market access, and you're not going to have it with a customs union. So I've gone from zero to hero when it comes to that. But I cannot find the Brexit disaster.
No. I mean, Boris said we got Brexit done. And I think he misled people to that extent, thinking, well, on day 2, it's all done. No,
I mean, Annunziata, are we glossing over the reality? What about those businesses who don't export to the bloc anymore because of red tape and cost?
We've still got a huge amount of red tape to cut. We've got.
Well, that's Brexit, isn't it?
That it's all part. We've got to get rid of laws that we absorbed when we were members that we can now get rid of, and we need to get rid of to increase our ability to live freely and to thrive economically.
But we were a member for 40 years. It doesn't happen overnight, does it?
Yes, but it wasn't 7 years.
It needs to be done.
Well, wasn't
it since we voted?
Remainers would argue that a vote for Brexit was red tape forever. They would argue that we will have red tape forever, because if you are a foreign country, as it were, outside of the bloc, it's going to be harder to do trade.
But we get to set what red tape we think is necessary and what we don't, and that if we don't want food that poisons us or is utterly cruel, we can say so. And if we think something else is equivalent to what we make anyway, we can accept that. And I think that's as it should be, but we do need to open up more.
Andy, let's have a look at this. Licensing plan for oil in King's Speech. Rishi Sunak is going to drill, baby, drill if he wins the next election, and it is going to be in the King's Speech this week. The right move?
It's probably not the right move. I think we need to start moving away from, you know, the gas and the fossil fuel industry. We should be moving towards...
3 minutes ago, you wanted a coal mine.
Well, no, I don't want a coal mine. I want industrial investment. I think we should be looking towards nuclear and hydro-subsidised industries, because, you know, they are the future. You know, nuclear's got a bad rap. You know, it's got pretty bad comms. You know, they should probably hide McKinsey or someone. But, you know...
No, I'm with you all the way. It definitely needs a better marketing department behind it, because it's zero carbon and essentially very reliable source of energy, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's it's a long-term solution. It takes a while to build a nuclear power station, but when you've built it, it lasts. I think we do need to see that plan both for the energy market in the UK and also employment in the UK. Because if we make this investment now, yeah, it might cost us a little bit, but in the long term, it'll serve such a great benefit to the country.
It is in the long term, and in the short term, we need to keep all our factories open, all our cars moving, all our homes heated, without relying on very dangerous countries abroad and being self-sufficient.
Saudi Arabia, Russia, and
well, that's
the like.
the point.
Absolutely,
the war in
we
the
need
Ukraine
to be using our
showed
own
that we were too
resources.
dependent on other countries, dangerous countries, for our oil.
Now, here's the worry. Keir Starmer is going to not have any future oil and gas licences if he becomes Prime Minister. Therefore, restricting our supply in the medium term, that's going to be a vote loser, isn't it? When people get their heads around what he's actually planning to do.
No, I think he's planning not to make any new licences.
Why not?
He will
I think
renew
he
them,
should be.
but he won't add to them. He will renew them, but not add to them, is the point. It's quite often misconstrued, which is fair enough. His comms team isn't ideal.
But I don't know about you, but I want new licences just so that we can guarantee future supply, so we don't have to go begging to Vladimir Putin or his replacement.
I disagree. I think, the Tories have trashed the economy. We need to make cuts in some areas so we can invest in others. I think if it means we don't renew new fossil fuel licences and we invest in energy and green energy, for the long term, I think that is a better plan than letting people.
There's one thing I've noticed about Keir Starmer. He's an echo.
Doesn't wear a poppy?
Well, apart from that, he's an echo, not a voice. So I don't think he'll stick to that. He may flip-flop again. He says what he thinks is popular at this particular time. So I don't think he's going to stick to that.
I just worry that this is a threat not just to our economy but our national security if the Prime Minister makes it harder for the UK to have energy
But that's
supplies.
why I think he'll flip-flop.
Because you're worried about the cost of living, and I share your concern about that, and you'd like a fair wage for a hard day's work.
Yeah.
And I share that too. But all you're going to do is ramp up the cost of living if the cost of energy increases, which will happen if we don't have supply.
Well, like it has the last 2 years.
Correct. Yeah. And that's what many would argue that is due to a lot of green tariffs already, and that we should have had access to more, especially gas fields, in the last 10 years, and then we could have used our own supply. Why is inflation so low in America? Because they've got so much shale. Who began that process of drilling for shale? Barack Obama.
Well, a liberal president. Wow,
most definitely. So isn't that the point? Is that when the green renewables kick in, fantastic, but that's not where we are at the moment. Yep. But that's where Keir Starmer thinks we are.
No, I think this issue goes back to the 80s when, the Conservative Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, shut down all the industrial hubs in the Midlands and the North and didn't have a plan. Like the Buy Your Own Council House scheme, there wasn't a plan. It goes back, it goes back decades, this Tory failure to look ahead. And Keir Starmer isn't going to make that mistake. He's going to make policies for the future, not for the now.
Annunciata?
Margaret Thatcher was actually very forward-looking and one of the greenest, most environmentally supportive prime ministers this country's ever had. And one of the things she did do is close the coal.
That's not why she did it, though, is it? We can't retrospectively make her Greta Thunberg.
No, but she did...
Greta Thatcher.
She did implement a lot of very green policies, which did include, obviously, nuclear. One of the problem with nuclear is you can't turn it on and off, and you need an alternative to that for high demand, low demand. The same goes for wind, which you can't control. And until we've got major batteries, we
were known as the poor man of Europe. And she made us the greatest economy in Europe during her reign, as it were. I think that Keir Starmer is saying what he's saying today. There's no guarantee he'll be saying something different next year.
My greatest concern is that Labour, who are likely to win the next election, are going to bet the house on renewables. And I think the conversation that no one's willing to have is that the push for renewables is a punt. It is an experiment. I cannot find any country in the world that is enjoying steady, consistent, secure supply of energy from renewables. Now, I'm not against it in principle. There are lots of jobs in it. And by the way, Britain is a global leader in green tech.
It's a target. It's a question of how
I think we need to start
get to that.
Right, how fast. And the fact that it is an experiment.
It's a complete experiment, and we don't actually know which technologies are going to turn out to be the most environmentally friendly. We only have to go back to diesel and discovering that actually, although the government thought it was the answer, it turns out to be much worse for us.
Polluting the air, killing our kids.
They're making the same mistakes now.
Most definitely. Look, Andy, that's my concern, is that Labour, if they get in, are going to bet the house on green renewables. We're going to have this national energy company. Is it Great British Energy? Yep. Why should the state be taking that gamble when private enterprise won't?
Because private enterprise have failed to provide for the British people.
Is it not a worry that they don't want to invest? What about those wind licences that were up for grabs a few weeks ago? No takers from the private sector, but us numpties, the public, will be paying for it through our taxes.
The private sector, I mean, Shell made, what, $5 billion last quarter? You know, it's outrageous. They can't be trusted. We need to take it into our own hands. They've failed decade upon decade. You know,
do you want... Look, you're a wise man with your head on your shoulders. Do you want to bet the house on green renewables? Do you not accept my point that, laudable as they may be, they are a punt, it's a gamble?
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, that's why we should increase the R&D on those industries.
But what if they don't deliver?
The government has cut the R&D on green tech, which isn't ideal.
No, that's a fair point. I think R&D is always a good investment. But do you not think Germany is a pretty bad advert for green renewables? They've massively invested over a decade, and they found themselves dependent on Moscow for energy supply just before they invaded Ukraine.
It's difficult to compare Germany to the UK. It's a completely different domestic situation, a completely different economy. You know, you can't compare the two. But I think what is needed is research into green technology and green energy, and, you know, that implemented on a long-term basis.
Fascinating stuff. All coming up, more from tomorrow's newspaper front pages and reaction in the studio from my brilliant pundits. And in the last word, next up, are we heading for World War III? I'll be joined live in the studio by a legendary journalist, a man who's seen more wars than Napoleon. Robert Fox is the world on borrowed time. That's next, plus more front pages. See you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. There you go. Listen, you've got disappearing presenters, you've got disappearing poppies. There we go. We are back. And let me tell you that we've got more front pages. Let's have a look at The Sun. The current bun. And they lead with, show some respect, fury over marches. Police told, protect Poppy Day services. Lose a stone for Christmas, Slimming World. I can save you a lot of time and money. Just cut the carbs, folks. The Times. Israel steps up assault on Hamas, and £15 billion windfall for the Treasury raises prospect of tax cuts. Some much-needed good news there. OK, folks, well, it's time now for The Last Word, in which a leading commentator reflects on the big story of the weekend. And tonight, as tensions grow in the Middle East following the Hamas attack on Israel, and with a complex axis that includes Iran and neighbouring countries with possible influence from China, Russia and beyond, put bluntly, are we heading towards World War III? To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome the revered defence editor of the Evening Standard, brilliant journalist Robert Fox. Robert, thank you so much for coming into the studio. I hope we see more of you going forward. Israel's key military objective is the elimination of Hamas. Can it be done, and how long might it take?
I think in the short term it can do it. It can probably, despite what the sceptics are saying, it probably can reduce, which you need, the military capability of Hamas in Gaza. Whether it can deal with Hamas single-handedly across the region is open to question, because the weakness is that the so-called, in inverted commas, moderate Arabs are not stepping up. This is why diplomacy is failing. You can go round and round, talk to the King of Jordan, talk to MBS, even in Saudi Arabia. The Egyptians are absolutely crucial, but are extremely reluctant, as we've seen over the Rafah crossing. And then we see this cauldron that is Lebanon. If that blows up, then we are globally in big trouble. So the algebra is very, very difficult. I think that Israel is being patient, and I think that, contrary to what the wiseacres were saying, it's preparing for really quite a long haul. I think that the ground operation will go on for at least 6 weeks, probably 2 or 3 months.
OK, and if, God forbid, World War III was to happen, well, that's game over for everyone, isn't it?
Yes, because if there is World War III on the way, as your proposition suggests, it's going to be utterly different from everything we saw with the big industrial wars of the 20th century, because it's going to involve cyber, space, it's going to involve battlefields where everything can be seen above the ground and above the sea. And it's going to be war among the people, as we have seen in Ukraine, as we have seen in the cities and the kibbutzim of Israel and what's going on in Gaza. It's going to be difficult to sort friend from foe and combatant from civilian.
With a nuclear element, of course. And
that is a very interesting one that you brought in, because I did a little checklist when I knew I was coming. You'd set me the exam question.
Yeah.
And that is the big unknown. And that is a thing that I think that the public and the commentariat is not taking seriously enough. We seem to be edging into another quite difficult nuclear arms race. The previous one was binary. It was Soviet bloc, NATO, led by America. Now it's the world and his wife and the possibility of non-state nuclear powers. This is why the guerrilla movements, the terrorists, are so dangerous, because of what they could get a hold of. Don't think that I'm exaggerating. The stuff that we have found in the various archives of Al-Qaeda showed that they had, and also the Japanese terrorists, they were interested in chemical warfare, in biological warfare, and nuclear, including whatever they might turn out to be. And God prevent that it ever happens to the nuclear dirty bomb.
Imagine that. So if Hamas got hold of nuclear weapons, let's bring my pundits in on this, if I can. Andy MacDonald, Annunciata Rees-Mogg, and Lord Taylor of Warwick. How worried are you about this, Lord Taylor, about the global situation, the threat of a third world war, which would surely be the last war?
Well, it is a serious situation, but when you look at the history of mankind, faith has always been a stronger force than fear. And so I believe, you look at the Bible, you look at history, world history, good eventually defeats evil. Now, evil may win a battle, but it doesn't win the war. So I'm not frightened. I've got faith, not fear.
What we need now is great diplomacy, Andy McDonald, a point made by Robert just before we went on air.
I completely agree. I think, whether it's the Conservative government or a Labour government in the UK, Great Britain will have a large role to play in negotiations if this kind of thing were to break out. And I think, a reliance on our civil service and our diplomatic service is needed. And I think we do need investment in the diplomacy corps to ensure that nothing like this will happen.
Annunziata, this demonstrates why Hamas must be dealt with.
It does, but I think that we've got to look at the bigger picture. What other things are going on? We've also already got a war between Russia and Ukraine. There are threats around Taiwan and China. This could become truly global unless it's stopped very quickly. What we don't want to do is put our enemies together. We need to be talking on lots of fronts, and the diplomacy has to be truly global to ensure that these threats don't come to pass. And we do need to clamp down on terrorists before they become big enough and strong enough to bring down the rest of the world.
Robert, I wish we had longer, but let's get you back in the studio very, very soon. My thanks to Robert Fox, the legendary defence editor of the Evening Standard, my brilliant pundits as well. You for your company. One last week, Monday to Friday, myself in the hot seat. That's right, I'll be doing 9 till 11 from tomorrow right through into next weekend. So I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Next up is the brilliant headliners. And look, have a nice evening and see you tomorrow.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There are a few showers to watch out throughout this bonfire night, particularly for western areas. They could be still heavy at times, pushing their way in across particularly northwest England, western Wales, through the Bristol Channel as well. Western areas of Scotland not escaping either. Into the second half of the night, we could just see a few beginning to skirt their way into Sussex and Kent, but a lot of other eastern areas will remain largely dry with some clear intervals. Underneath that, some mist and fog possible. It will also turn relatively chilly, particularly so for eastern Scotland, where we can expect some frost. So quite a chilly start to the new working week here. But as we head into Monday, it is a day of sunshine and showers for many. Those showers most frequent in the west once again, perhaps a few rumbles of thunder, maybe some hail in those heaviest ones as well. Into the afternoon, just starting to see those showers progress into eastern areas of England, but still with a good amount of sunshine in between them. Temperatures around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you are in those sunnier spots. For Tuesday, it will again start relatively showery, but we've got this ridge of high pressure that's going to be moving its way in during the day. That will gradually help to ease off the showers, particularly for western areas as we head into the afternoon. So turning drier here, again, some sunny intervals to watch out for and enjoy if you are out and about. The winds also easing off throughout the day as well. As we head into Wednesday, there is a more persistent band of rain that will be sweeping its way across the UK. And then into Thursday, the showers return once again. Enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.